back to We Love the State. I am your host, Andy Coons. Oh, wait, I forgot our state's favorite
podcast.
The state's favorite podcast. I'm your host, Andy Coons. Over here to my left is my wonderful co-host, Ben DeYoung. How you doing, Ben?
Doing good. It's been quite the last couple days, and so it'll be fun to get into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is kind of off topic. I mean, we don't even have a topic right now, but our guests on our last episode, Josh and Jesse from Vape IQ, are going on to the Two Doomed Men podcast today at 8 p.m. So this is going to come out tomorrow. So, hey, check out the Two Doomed Men podcast so you can see Josh and Jesse again if you're just super into vaping.
Well, I think it was just, I'm not big into vaping, but it was still extremely informative. I mean, it's just crazy what, even the politics of small business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And having to deal with the state at their level, even though that they're providing, a clearly superior product,
Mm-hmm.
not just physical product, but all the teaching and everything else that they do. I mean, they should be the gold standard, and instead they're getting persecuted.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. But that was our last episode. This episode, we have a totally brand new topic that never talked about before, libertarianism. So
it's a fringe thing. You may or may not have heard of it.
So you went to the state convention recently. I'll give it to you. Tell us what you saw, what happened, what went down.
Yeah, so like most libertarian convention, the screeching started very quickly and very early. It always makes me sad for the state of libertarians that they result to the same tactic as the woke left. When they don't like somebody, they try to yell them down. They swear at them. They call them names. And it's just disgusting behavior. And I've had a little bit of back and forth with some of them. And to immediately have them go, well, it's not my fault, it's his fault. It's like, no, your behavior is your own fault. And that's just it does. Every time I go to a libertarian convention, I walk away worse off in many ways, just for the sake of the party, and the people who get the most attention tend to be the ones who scream the loudest. And we talk a lot as far as philosophy, and we don't talk about behaviors, and that's something I think the party has really failed on, is not only tolerating the behaviors but almost encouraging them, because they tend to get results.
Yeah.
Which is it's sad, and it's what chases away a lot of new people that are interested in libertarianism, but they see that behavior and they immediately go, no thanks. And I can't fault them on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. There was something about the episode that Dave did after National. Dave Smith, I'm talking about Part of the Problem. Of course, that's the only Dave I ever talk about. But
sorry, other Daves.
Yeah. But watch Dave Coulier be like one of our listeners. He's like, this POS. Like,
F you guys.
F you guys. I thought he was talking about me. No, but the episode that Dave Smith did right after National, where he basically broke down why he didn't run for president. And there's this story he tells where somebody comes up to him in like roller skates and a thong. A man comes up to him in roller skates and a thong, and starts asking, political questions, and they're good questions. And Dave said he just sat there and was just like, this is a joke, and yeah, I think it's wild that some people want to scream about decorum in a state convention, and yet it's totally acceptable and even encouraged to come to a national convention for a political party in roller skates and a thong. You know, it's you're you're treating you're treating the party as a whole with the amount of seriousness that it deserves. You know?
Yeah, and I think it shows a lot of selfishness because it's clearly very much attention-seeking behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's 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 definitely virtue signaling. You know, it's like I'm screaming the loudest because I have the most to say,
Mm-hmm.
or because I am the most outraged, and that somehow makes me better.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just it's almost like a form of narcissism
Yeah.
of just it's just it's sad and it's gross.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, that's to kind of go back to the last weekend. That's how things started off, um, and we limped through the convention. So for those who don't know, the state party has kind of been broken in two for the last 4 years or so, if not, yeah, 4 years. There was a fracture. I've also kind of gone back and forth on this. The fracture I kind of reference is kind of a left and right divide, just because a lot of the other side uses left tactics, like I said, with the screeching and the yelling and swearing, and it's not a perfect divide. There's definitely people, former Republicans, that joined up with the left side of the party, and you can tell that they don't like the screeching, but they are willing to tolerate it because of how much they hate the other side. And it's almost like a microcosm of the Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
It's I don't care about results. I just hate that other person or that other team or that other group so much that I will settle for failure, or I will be fine burning it down as long as they don't have control.
Well, it's allowing the left right dichotomy, which the Libertarian Party should be the answer to. It should be the way out of that left right sort of duopoly. Um, but they buy right into it, I'm saying this like I'm a right wing libertarian. I have I have come to accept that about myself. Like, I'm a right winger. I think that family traditions and family values are extremely important. Um, I've which is funny coming from like a former leftist, but like I don't know. I have firmly planted myself on the right half of the spectrum. But man, like if you look at libertarianism as a philosophy or as a legal system, like it's not liberal and it's not conservative. It doesn't say anything about family values, but I think that especially when it comes to the screeching, it's allowing that what we see on the outside in the left and the right creeping into the Libertarian Party. But I mean, it's been like that for forever.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the benefit with the Libertarian Party is it is very decentralized. So for example, at the affiliate level, you don't really see that nearly as much. I mean, every once in a while, someone may go in a tirade, but you're not going to shout somebody down that you meet with on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're only seeing them once a year at a convention, whether it's state or national, you can treat them like absolute crap and without any remorse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just I think it's also a symptom of just the American culture at large, of just it's all about me. And that's I
Yeah.
mean, there's also maybe a downside to libertarianism because it is so focused on oneself and one's identity and what one person believes. There is a complete absence of groupthink, and that's a two-edged sword. How do you move a party forward if you're not willing to put aside
Your
um
personal little things.
right for the benefit of the whole?
Mm-hmm.
And that is almost looked at as a negative when it
Well,
should be looked at as a positive.
I think that individualism is, I mean, I think that that is a extremely important value to have, like treating people as an individual. Sorry, treating people as an individual is an extremely important value to have, but um,
And
the,
individual responsibility.
an individual responsibility, you know, but there does have to be some sort of like cultural cohesion within the party, you know, and it can't just be that we're all gun nuts, you know, it's got to be more than that, you know, the rampant individualism, like a toxic level of individualism. That's what the boomers had. The boomers had a toxic level of individualism. It was all about me. It was all about how am I going to get the most out of life for myself. And listen, you can see that continuing on through Gen X. You see that with the millennials. Like millennials. I mean, I know that they like to look at boomers and be like, "Oh, everything wrong with our society is your fault." But it's like, "Hey, millennials, you're doing the same thing. Go watch millennial all that, sorry, all that live, laugh, love stuff is
Look at me, look at me, look at me.
look at me, and it's how can I do the best thing possible for me today, you know? And
I think Rush Limbaugh talked about symbolism over substance.
mhm.
And I
And
think that's very applicable.
yeah. Um I haven't listened to Rush Limbaugh in 20 years probably.
It's definitely a callback.
Yeah. Um Not since I was in my truck on the way home from school with my dad. That's when we listened to
Yep.
Rush Limbaugh. But um but anyway, yeah, it's just that there is a level of individualism that is toxic because it does not account for future generations. You know, it doesn't take your kids into account. It doesn't take your grandkids into account. Like, and that's something that I think the right is at least better at shining a light onto. Um, of like, hey, what are we gonna like? Living in a country with no family values is not good for the country, you know? Because when you have family values, you are thinking about like, hey, if I vote this way, or if I go and set up a 401k or some kind of retirement plan, like, is this enough that I can retire, but also I can leave something for my kids so that they don't have to struggle like I did, you know? And it's just it is rampant individualism, and we need to get a little bit of tribalism back, you know?
Yeah, there definitely needs to have a balance. And again, I think anytime you're in a group, you, if, there is going to be times where you may have to sacrifice, the good of the individual for the good of the group. And I think that's a dynamic, it's a moving target. There's no like right or wrong answer, but that's where it's so important to have open dialogue and be able to discuss things because, there I've moved on some topics and hopefully I've moved others on topics. And if you have that mutual respect and the desire to move forward as a whole, you have those conversations and it's done appropriately. But you're not going to move somebody if you're just screaming at them in front of 100 people. That's not intellectually honest. It's really, you're just making it about yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, I have a lot less hope for the party in general just because of so much of that behavior. And so, even Stephen Nikila, the current chair, he's even talking about on X is we need to make the party a bigger tent. And he's, because I think he made some comment about he wants to have a preacher and a prostitute in the same room talking about the same issues.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that's a good strategy.
No.
You almost need to really start to hone down and like really, what are we going to tolerate and what are we going to promote? And that might be a smaller subset of libertarians. But you can then grow from that base because you have that mutual respect. You have um, not necessarily laws, but you have what you tolerate, and that's, we unfortunately champion freedom of speech to such a degree that it's it allows for anything and everything behavior wise.
Yeah.
And it's disheartening. Like I said before, every time I go to a state or national convention, it's you just walk away and you just shake your head, and it's even this time around, like there's a lot of people on the other side that I really like, and I saw them shaking their heads, but they are willing to tolerate it to obtain control and power because they believe the ends justify the means.
Yeah. You know, the it's funny that you brought up that line about the preacher and the prostitute. Um, that was the episode of the Liam McCullough show that had Dave Smith on it. Again, I'm a simp.
Yeah, that was a
Sorry.
really good one.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the points that Dave Smith brought up was that no, I don't think we should have a preacher and the prostitute in the same thing. Because I think it's I I think that's actually what's doing us a disservice right now, is thinking that um, we should be inviting prostitutes into our ranks, when these are morally degenerate people, like we shouldn't be inviting them. We shouldn't be encouraging that. I mean, yeah, we can all have our individual liberty, and you own yourself, and you can do what you want with your body, and we're all good capitalists and stuff like that, but it's like, not like, we can't encourage that, and it's the exact same problem with the guy in the roller skates and the thong, you know no, we shouldn't be open-minded to that. Like, we shouldn't be so open-minded that our brains fall out, which I think is a Michael Malice quote. Actually, I don't know if he originally quoted it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, you shouldn't be so open-minded that your brains fall out. And I think that's one of the overwhelming issues that the Libertarian Party has, and has probably had for a long time. I mean, this goes back to the guy in the roller skates and the thong, the prostitute and the preacher, the dancing naked guy on stage, back
Well,
in,
the what's his face, the wizard with the boot on his head that
yeah,
was
Vermin
running for
Supreme,
president, Vermin
yeah.
Supreme.
And it's all like, okay, you treat like actually winning with this party with as much seriousness as like, I don't know. I feel like I had a banger quote there, and it all just kind of fell apart. But
Almost like a bad meme.
yeah, yeah, it's just, I don't know. These people put as much seriousness as honestly I think the party deserves in their eyes, and that was something that, man, the first state convention I went to, I was just like, this is a joke, and just seeing some of the people there were there and were active in the party, and you can just tell purely because their whole life revolves around the next convention, when they can go and get behind that microphone, and for 30 seconds the entire room has to, by force, listen to them. Excuse me.
Yeah, and that's something I talked to a few people over the convention. Is there are people that they the party is their social life, it is their religion,
Mm-hmm.
it is what they live and breathe, and that when they lost that 4 years ago, they lost their minds.
Yeah.
And especially though, I think that there is also a component of, well, I've been here for 30 years, I helped build this, you don't have the right to take it away.
Mm-hmm.
And when that occurred, for those who aren't kind of aware of the schism in the party, is they tried to start their own party and claim that they were the legitimate Libertarian Party,
Mm-hmm.
and that got struck down by our internal judicial committee, and then they started suing the party, and there was multiple lawsuits, and so you had two parties basically running in parallel for maybe 1 to 2 years. Then you had the lawsuits, and just kind of the other side lobbying hate. I was the director of communication, so I worked a lot with the new leadership that kind of took over, and it was a constant uphill battle. I mean, I had to block people on social media accounts just because they were just doing everything they could to trash the party
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't have control. And that's just, again, it's you're just making it about yourself, and you're not looking out for what's best for the party. And so last weekend, they came with numbers, and the I would say the more right side of the party didn't show, and they kicked everybody out. Even the committees that were supposed to give presentations on suggested changes in bylaws and platform, they wouldn't even let them present because they hated the makeup of those committees because they weren't involved.
Yeah.
And then once they took over the party, now their messaging is all unity and how we need to heal. And it's like, you bastards have been doing everything to burn the party down for the last 4 years, but now you have control, and so your message completely changes.
Yep.
It's gross. I it's hard for me to bite my tongue sometimes when I'm on Facebook or X and I see some of these posts, and I have my weak moments where I'll lob a response, and then I'm like, why am I even being allowed to be dragged down? Because I just get called names, and they're you're arguing with children, and it's I think it's much better just to stay above the fray in a lot of ways. And I'm not pointing all the fingers. I think that there was leadership failure on us over the last 4 years. We definitely had some leaders who were more antagonistic and almost enjoyed kind of poking the bear, and I don't think that's constructive either.
Mm-hmm.
I left the Mises Caucus, for personal reasons, and I got, I it didn't go well. We'll put it that way. So I do understand some of the angst and concerns from the people who now kind of run the party about past behavior. But it's just it still goes back to, are you in this for yourself, or are you in this to further liberty, using the vehicle of the Libertarian Party
Yeah.
to achieve those goals?
Yeah.
And that's going to be, I think, a test to the people now in control, because there is a lot of work to be done, and the majority of the party would rather be keyboard warriors, and or maybe they just want to prioritize their families, and you can't fault them for that. But you can't move a party forward if they just, if you're just in text threads, and you occasionally, attend your affiliate.
Yeah.
We need more people who are willing to put. I mean, my daughter's birthday was last weekend. Thankfully, I was able to bring my girls and my mom to the party convention. So I didn't sacrifice everything for the party, but it was an expensive convention. The rooms were over like $300 a night. I mean, for what I worked the entire time. I did all the audio video recording. So, I just, spent over $600. I could have taken my girls on a very nice vacation for that. That's the price you pay for, again, trying to push the party forward. And again, as a great man once said, I wish them well.
Yep. Well,
That's, I think, one of Trump's famous lines.
Well, he is great if you ask him. If you ask Trump, he'll be like, "I'm great. I'm tremendous." Yeah, I I don't know. My mind goes in 15 different directions whenever it comes to this stuff. Did the Libertarian Party even ever have a chance? Because it's been a century that we've had, more than that, I think, since it's been just Democrats and just Republicans, and so it's like they've built this system that will not allow power to go beyond those two parties. The,
Well,
the,
especially after Ross Perot.
yeah. Well, and so here's my thing. Like I've thought for years now, like I think it would be better. Like I think the Mises Caucus would have been more successful if it would have started within the Republican Party. I think that right now the Republican Party is the closest they've ever been to libertarianism than ever in history,
Right. If you kind of peel back the mega cult side,
Yeah.
but I think many on the mega, is the just leave me alone, stop the wars, stop the spending, very much libertarian leaning. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't have anybody outside of the Thomas Masseys that can give them a voice in the current Republican.
But I mean, here's the silver lining, and me doing my whole silver lining thing. Thomas Massey is repeatedly rebuked by the president of the United States, the leader of the MAGA coalition. All right, repeatedly told, "We're going to primary you. We're going to get you out of office," and the dude just keeps coming back. The dude just keeps winning. There is, listen, you can find 5 people on Twitter who are in MAGA who actually don't like Thomas Massey, like the Laura Loomers and the cat turds out there,
Right.
these priests in this cult, other than that, like, because there are some cultish aspects of it, but I think the sort of cult side that we're seeing of it are really the talking heads that we see on Twitter, but like you go out and you find somebody in a MAGA hat right now and be like, what do you think about Thomas Massey? They're going to tell you that guy's awesome, and it's because I think the bigger picture is that, like, the Republican Party is the closest thing to the Libertarian Party right now. They're headed in a very broad term, and I say this sort of like gently, but like they're moving in a good direction. The Michael Knowles just said on his show, and it was after, and there's a part of me that's really disappointed that it took this to get him to finally question our relationship with Israel. But after the Catholic Church was bombed, he was like, you guys lost me, and which, I don't want to fault him for not being perfect. I don't want to fault him for not, reaching the same conclusion that I did at the same exact time that I did. But he got there, it reminds me back of whenever I was a left winger. And I was all about feminism and things like that. And there was this guy who's wearing a shirt. He goes, I'm a feminist because, that's what it says on the front. And on the back it says, because I have a wife and I have 3 daughters and, they're everything to me. And it's just like, like, whatever you feel about feminism, it's kind of like, well, that's a nice shirt. The guy loves his wife and he loves his girls, and, and there's people in the comments saying like, oh, so it took you having daughters to finally become a feminist, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, who cares? Like, he got there, and that's something that's always bugged me. And I don't want to fault Michael Knowles in that same way, because you know what? Doesn't matter ultimately how he got from point A to point Z, he got to point Z. And maybe now that he looks at Israel in a different light in defense of his Catholic beliefs, maybe now he can be like, oh yeah, and they also murdered 55,000 people. They also leveled Gaza. This is a conversation I had with some of my family members whenever I most recently went down to visit them. I was like, you can find this on Google Maps. You can pull up Google Maps right now and just see an endless ocean of destruction in Gaza. Go look at any place that looks populated in Gaza and it's leveled. It's all ruined. It's all destroyed. you just see a bunch of foundations in the dirt, you know, and paths carved in between these collapsed buildings, that, it is one of the most harrowing things I've ever witnessed, and it's just out there in the open on Google Maps, you know.
Yeah, it's an extermination campaign. I mean, you don't bomb churches and hospitals and colleges
Mm-hmm.
because of Hamas.
Yeah.
You bomb them to make sure that nobody is coming back.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where it's just like, I don't know, that if you want to see evil, if you want to see what evil looks like, go to Google Maps or to Google Earth and zoom into Gaza and just look at the destruction. It's horrible. It's horrible to see, you know?
Yeah, I wish more Christians especially would kind of wake up on this issue. And I agree with, there is, yeah, I think the big one to me was Piers Morgan, when
Yeah.
he finally flipped the script and said, I can't, because he was such a stunt. Everybody on his show after October 7th was, do you condemn Hamas? I mean,
Yeah.
he marched right along with the talking points. And I think it was Mehdi Hassan. He finally admitted, he said, I can't defend this anymore. And I can appreciate, yeah, he's late to the party. He was late to the party on COVID. He's definitely I will follow the marching points and the lines that I'm supposed to say up until a point, and then he'll get good on a topic.
Yeah.
With Michael Knowles, I think that's that I think to your point is, I mean, I'm glad he's gotten there, and hopefully he does do a reflection to say why did it take me this long? But I think that there is almost a prevalence, maybe because we've vilified Muslims since 9/11.
Yeah.
As every Muslim's a terrorist. I mean, sometimes there's a couple South Park clips that are really funny now to look at. The Muslim kid comes in and Eric Cartman's like, uh-oh, is anybody checking him for bombs? And that's because of that constant indoctrination. I think that there are Christians who look at their lives as less.
Yeah.
And that's I think, a lot of Israelis, that's out in the open for them. I mean, that's what the Talmud teaches.
Well, I mean,
that their lives are less.
We have to go back to 2001, and we have to remember what the culture was like in 2001. The towers just fell, the and it's exposed as this Islamic terrorist attack. You have to understand, there were a very small group of people who actually stood up and said, Bill Maher was one of them. He said that, one thing that you can't say about the terrorists is that they were cowards. They're not cowards. Whoopi Goldberg was another one, and it's funny to think that they were really good on this issue back then, and they are bad on just about every issue now. But Bill Barr's he's good on some things, but he's still Bill Barr. Bill Maher, my bad.
Bill Maher. Or
Yeah.
it was like Bill Maher and Bill Burr together.
Yeah. Bill Maher, that's what I meant, my bad. But Whoopi Goldberg, she was like, these terrorists are like people with families, and Rosie O'Donnell was another one who spoke out about this. They're like, these are people with families who watch their kids die,
that we've killed them.
Yeah. And she was like, it's totally understandable that this happens, and I don't think that they were, I don't remember how quickly they reached that point, but it was back when there was an actual anti-war left. And it was just like a whole country united around a couple of things after 9/11. It united around this attack on our soil, and it united around this 360-degree hatred for Middle Easterners, and particularly for Muslims. And that's, it's that same sentiment that caused that. And I don't remember his name. I probably should, but I don't. The guy, he shot up a Sikh church, which are not Muslims. It's totally different religion, but they wear turbans. And so he saw a bunch of guys with turbans at this church. He went in and started shooting people, it is like that is something that happened in our culture, and it's still this like kind of open wound. And talking to members of my family, that wound is very much still like open and active and festering, like people in America, like they hate Muslims,
And I
and
think that's not a mistake. I think that's purposeful,
mm-hmm.
because that allowed us to go into Iraq and Afghanistan.
and just totally decimate that whole hemisphere.
Right. And I think that there was purposefulness to that, because it gave, my brother was in the military, and it's amazing. They refer to any Middle Eastern as a sand N word.
Yeah, or
And
or
they
towel head
just,
or rag head or
yeah,
yeah.
they dehumanize them, and
Mm-hmm.
so it just makes it easier to see them being killed, because I think that you see some of the stuff that the Babylon Bee guys were saying. Well, there's only 200 or so Catholics in Gaza, and this is a tough pill to swallow, but they all support Hamas, immediately justifying the killings.
Of Christians.
And I think there are, unfortunately, maybe even a majority of Christians who view it that way. Is you're just guilty by association. If you're a Christian, what are you even doing there? They're all terrorists.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can lump in a 10-year-old as a terrorist or a future terrorist, I think the veil really has come off
Mm-hmm.
with this whole Israeli, destruction of Gaza, and now the West Bank. I think this is the 8th American that's been killed by Israelis in the West Bank.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, they originally were like, well, they were harboring terrorists, or they were being used as human shields, and that justified. Now they're just saying we're just going to kill them.
Yeah.
And they're just guilty by association.
Yeah.
And they don't even have they're not even trying to find an excuse anymore for killing the innocent skin kids.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy. Some of the doctors that come back and say, I've seen dead bodies of kids with headshots every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no accident. If you're shooting somebody in the head, it's not an accidental.
That's an execution.
That's an execution, and these are kids.
Yeah.
And then and they have, Israeli has viewing areas
Mm-hmm.
where they can have school trips to come over to Gaza to see the IDF just leveling the place and killing people by the hundreds, and they celebrate it.
Yeah.
And it's toxic, and the fact that it's so pervasive even in the U.S., where we have, especially again, the Christian element and how it's so tied and wedded to Israel. I hope there's more people that reach that breaking point, like Michael Knowles.
Yeah.
Where they just go, I can't support this anymore.
Yeah.
Because we desperately need it, because it's, not only are we funding it and we're paying for it, but there's a lot of people that are actually celebrating it, and it's just disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man, it's horrible. I don't even remember how we got on to this topic, but it's one of those things. Even Mike Huckabee, like who has historically been like an Israel first guy. He's our ambassador.
U.S. ambassador, yeah.
He's our ambassador to Israel, and even he was saying, like, I will recommend that Americans not, fly to Israel. I don't remember his exact.
Well, Israel was denying Christian groups, like church groups or missionary groups. They were saying you're not welcome in Israel.
Well,
and I found out that it's actually illegal for Christians to try to convert. You can get thrown in jail in Israel.
Oh yeah, they'll spit on Christians in Israel. Like if you're, and there are Christians who live there, but it's a totally socially acceptable thing where if you're just in the street existing as a Christian, a Jew can walk by you and just spit in your face. you know?
Well, especially if you're wearing like a priest. I mean, where it's obvious that you are a Christian.
Yeah.
Like you're guaranteed to get spit on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's horrible. Um,
I think we were talking about the kind of the cultural rot in the United States, which kind of got us to the Israel, but just because it's affected the Libertarian Party. I think it's infected Christianity.
mm-hmm.
It's yeah, I don't know how it gets. I think it's just because we've lived so high on the hog for so long, and I think that's what it was talking about, individuality, and kind of the boomer selfishness, and maybe even the millennial selfishness of the me first attitude. And that's it's I think it's also a symptom of a dying empire.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I
Is
mean, Epstein was definitely indicative of that. Did you watch the Tucker Carlson Daryl Cooper, the most recent one?
Yeah.
Fantastic conversation. I mean, it's a horrific conversation, but it like I cannot recommend to anybody watching or listening, go listen to the Tucker Carlson Daryl Cooper interview, the one that he just did. And one of the things that Daryl Cooper put out there was like, listen, Jeffrey Epstein is just our Caligula. He's just our Sod, or Desaad, whatever his name was. But it's in a collapsing empire. You see stuff like this. You see Jeffrey Epstein's. You see these like rampant, like sexual deviant, operations like this. Where you have these obscenely wealthy people just treat normal people like they're cattle, and they treat them like they're sexual cattle. There's something so profoundly like disturbing about that. And so then I guess the thing we got to figure out now is like, okay, well, how does this collapse happen? Is it going to be controlled? How can we manage it? Like what can we do? Because we know it's coming, like we know it's going to happen. It's just, what do we do now?
Right. Well, and I mean, I think the one of the important thing is we don't, because a lot of times these collapses are aligned with war.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the number one thing that we have to make sure that doesn't hurt. We want to collapse more like the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Where we just say, all right, you're all, whatever you want to do, we're not going to roll in the tanks.
Yeah.
But I think on the other side of that collapse is it's going to require community even more. And I think sometimes when you're forced into adopting more of a communal attitude, and you just, if we get inflation like Argentina, where, by the time you get paid, you've lost half of that paycheck by the time you get to the grocery store.
Yeah.
That was the 1920s Weimar Republic. The same thing was, all of a sudden when you're faced with that level of hardship, you can't just fix that or address it on your own. You need other people. And it's great to see what Milei's been doing in Argentina. I mean, it's just incredible. We have a libertarian who has authority, and look what he's achieving. It's just awesome. So, if we can see, somebody like that as the gold standard of like what can be done with libertarian principles and ideas.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's super exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's as good a point as any to wrap this episode up. I think that we got some tough times ahead of us as a nation. I think that ultimately good's going to win over evil, and evil's not sustainable. So that's my sort of silver lining take on the whole thing. But if you want to follow me on TikTok, I've been posting more there. I have this 4-video series that I put out, basically outlining how I converted from atheism to Christianity, and it's been performing pretty well. So if you want to follow me there, it's at Andy Coons. That's Koons. If you want to follow me on X, it's at Andy_Coons. And then yeah, where can they find you, Ben?
So I'm picture this 1979. I probably post most to Instagram and to X. Now that I'm not as involved with the state party, I'm going to be on X. I think on my personal platform a lot more, and so the gloves are going to come off, which is kind of freeing, which I am excited about.
Mm-hmm.
For those other, libertarians that have listened in Michigan or from Michigan, and maybe you're discouraged about the outcome of this past weekend, just know that we aren't. This isn't the end. I've gotten some working with some other great libertarians and some ideas of how do we make an impact and continue to drive liberty forward, even outside of the state party.
Yeah.
So there are vehicles, there are plans that are being formulated. We're going to have some, I think, really cool announcements in the next couple of weeks about what we're going to do with our time and efforts moving forward. And so don't be disheartened. I try to, again, that's almost more or just as much for me as it is for, those of you listening or watching, because it does feel like it just like a failure of sorts. But, the best thing about failure is you learn from it and you're going to be better moving forward.
Yep.
So that's kind of my hot take on all of that. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. It's a lot of learning through the whole thing, and I think that's life. And so you have to take your licks sometimes, and you just get up and you move forward.
Yeah.
But it's great to be able to have a voice like this and an audience like all of you. And thank you for tuning in.
Yep. Thank you very much. Hey, like and subscribe to this. Share this podcast with your friends. Tell your friends about us. I think personally, we're the best libertarian podcast in Michigan. Some people, wrong people, don't agree with that sentiment. But
we are the state's favorite podcast.
We are the state's favorite podcast. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.